Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Alan V. Goldman. We're going to be discussing his amazing book, Reflections on Mountaineering, a journey through life as experienced in the mountains. Now make sure when you're heading on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble or his personal site, mountainreflections.art, and you pick up your copies of the book, you want to get the 4th edition. Okay, that's the latest edition, the 2022 release. So once more, that's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly through his site, mountainreflections.art. Alan was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best publishers in the business, Author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you or anybody you know have a book that they'd like moved, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give and contact ARP to move it for you. You can find out more information on them and their wonderful team at authorreputationpress.com. And as I stated, Alan is the expert, so let's bring him here on the line with us. Alan, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, man?
Thank you for having me on your show, and it gives me an opportunity to discuss mountaineering, which, unlike as in Europe, is not so celebrated in America as it is there.
Absolutely.
And I think that in Europe, people follow mountain climbers the way some people follow race car drivers here in the States, who's climbed which mountain, how fast, and so forth and so on. There's no sense of that here. That's because the Alps are right dead smack in the middle of Europe, and our mountains are in Colorado. It's a journey. You have to take 2 planes, and they're not in close proximity to urban centers, unlike as in Europe, where the Swiss Alps in particular are surrounded by Milan and Munich and so forth.
That is a great place to start, man, because I really want to start right there from the ground level. How did you become attracted to mountaineering, especially given your educational background?
Well, in high school, I was not a jock. All right? Don't think that to be a mountaineer, you need to be one. I definitely was a nice Jewish boy from Central Park West. And it does beg a question as to how I got hooked on climbing. I didn't like organized team sports. I did do a little wrestling. I was in the wrestling team, but it's not really a team. It's a one-on-one encounter, even though it's on behalf of the team. And after Horace Mann, which was a very demanding prep school in the old sense of what a prep school used to be, and Harvard College, and then Harvard Law School, I had a moment of clarity. I said to myself at the age of 25, is this it? Am I going to be hunched over a desk reading footnotes for the rest of my life, put in somebody else's brief, and maybe someday in mine? Is that all I have to aspire to? Is that what life is about? And I had 4 weeks a year in vacation time. Some very ambitious attorneys never took a day of vacation. I took my vacations, and I took them always in the mountains. And you need a 2-week vacation to acclimatize to a mountain before you climb it. You don't just go to Aspen, for instance, at 7,000 or 8,000 feet, and then go climb the next day a 14er. But let me back up a little bit. I started with hiking here in New York City. The Appalachian Mountain Club is based here, and they have hikes. They're only an hour from the city in Harriman State Park, Sterling Forest, Anthony's Nose, and of course the Appalachian Trail itself, which cuts across northwest New Jersey, which is part of the Allegheny mountain range. And there, the hikes are all rated, as to speed that the leader is going to go at, difficulty of terrain, length of journey, and so forth. And you're free to pick and choose, according from the book that they publish, a little handbook, which type of adventure you'd like to go on. And you're given fair warning of what to expect. From hiking, I transitioned into skiing, and I skied all the shishi places that one would expect a person of my sort to do. First, I went to Stowe in Vermont, and then out to Colorado, to Vail, Aspen, Breckenridge, Telluride. In Wyoming, I got to Jackson Hole, where the Grand Teton is. But in Colorado, I encountered the phenomenon known as the 14ers. What are they? Well, there are 54 peaks. Some mountains are we call peaks because they're angular and sharp and angry-looking mountains. Others we call mountains because they're more rounded. And there are 54 of these features that are over 14,000 feet high in Colorado alone. And they're only in Colorado. There are no 14,000-foot peaks outside of Colorado except a few in California. Mount Whitney, for instance. Climbing the Teeners, or the 14ers, is a pastime. In summer, you could do it, some of them, in your tennis shoes. Not all recommended that way, however. There, too, like with hiking, you can pick and choose the level of challenge that you want to subject yourself to, that you feel you're going to be competent to handle. Because after all, the draw of climbing is to experience the psychological state of mind that we call flow, F-L-O-W. What is flow? Well, it's a state of mind where one has a sensation of intense, competent mastery over your environment. Usually it's built up by the accretion of a series of small successes during the course of executing some self-directed goal of considerable difficulty. And it requires total immersion in the moment, total absorption with what you're doing. I have one poem called The Power of Now, where I talk about that and our way to the top, pages 16 and 17 of the book. I say, nothing else can possibly suffice than to endure and celebrate these intense periods of time. For now we have stepped out of mere time on our own volition and passed into a type of suspended animation where nothing else counts except the next step taken now out of the wake we leave behind us. And, well, you don't think about the past. You don't contemplate the past. You don't predict the future. You focus on the present because literally, quite literally, your life depends upon where you're going to put your foot next. And it really boils life down to a sense of immediacy. And one, if everything goes well, enjoys being in a state of flow, because it's like when an athlete says, oh, I'm in the zone. Or a musician says, I'm in the groove, I get into the groove. The sensation of time is altered. It's said to slow down for the person in a state of flow. 1 or 2 minutes that you think is 1 or 2 minutes can turn out to be 1 or 2 hours. You're lost, totally immersed in what you're doing, and you lose track of time, literally. There needs to be certain prerequisites to achieving this sense of flow. You need to have a balance, an equilibrium between your capability and your responsibility. If your capability is greater than your responsibility, you feel, well, bored. You have the feeling of anomie, as the French sociologists say, and it's written in this area. And this is an area where there's been a considerable amount of academic research. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you don't want the opposite. You don't want your capability to be less than your responsibility, because then you're frightened, you're fearful, you're alienated from as the Marxists would say, from the product of your work. You feel that it's greater than you are, and you're overwhelmed by it. Only when there's a balance between capability and responsibility can there even begin to be the possibility of the existence of flow. It's a prerequisite. Flow generally is thought to induce a generalized feeling of well-being, a calm, I would say almost serene exaltation. It's not a drug high. It's a Rocky Mountain high. It's a sense of personal transcendence over surrounding environmental conditions that you find yourself in. But it's not limited to physical activities of mountaineering. As I said, athletes experience it, musicians experience it. The doctor, the chief surgeon, let's say, in an operating room, the one who's saying to the others, junior people, scalpel, retractors, sponge, he's in a state of flow because it's built up by the accretion of a series of small successes, one after the other seriatim. And you begin to feel that you are the master of all you survey. Of course, it's an illusion. But that brings us to our next topic. The idea is that flow enables you, facilitates, let's put it that way, the ability to create something out of nothing. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the classical existentialist notion that life is a series of choices, and depending upon, as Robert Frost said, which road we take in a yellow wood makes all the difference. In climbing, existentialist thinking is important because when one climbs the mountain, one imbues the mountain with human meaning. After all, the mountain is just rock snow and ice, okay? I'm not pretending that it's anything but that. But when you are in a state of flow, in a creative state of mind, you are infusing into the mountains the stamp of your personality. And that's in one of my poems also. I talk about in being and nothingness, I say, the mountain might say, see here, I was but the I have talking mountains in my poems. See here, I was but the quintessence of nothingness until you forced your will upon my blank form, and by your striving imparted meaningfulness to my abidingly neutral presence, signifying the ultimate mark of the reality of humanity's trek upon a void of vacancy. And existentialist effort to impart meaning to what otherwise would be just a blank on the map is the goal of most mountaineering. Everyone wants to climb, a mountain be the first to climb a particular mountain or by a particular route, because one wants to bring human nature to a place where there had been no human contact at all. In fact, the presence of humans had not been foreseen at the time of creation. If one believes there was a time of creation, there was no thought that humans would ever be present here. It's like walking into a picture postcard. You see these pictures, and only the mountaineer has the power to actually penetrate, pierce the veil between you and the picture with the mountain in the background. You're actually up there. I remember when I was on Mount Sneffels, there's a 4,000, that's 4 Empire State Buildings, a 4,000-foot drop from the summit of the northwest face to the base of the valley. It usually start at about 10,000 feet, where that's the highest point you can get to by four-wheel drive. And then there's an approach march. And then there's about 4,000 feet of climbing if you're climbing a 14er. The lack of oxygen starts to affect you at 13,000 feet, no matter how well acclimatized you are. The FAA requires pilots to go on oxygen at 9,000 feet. And of course, they've had no time to acclimatize. But mountaineers tend not to like to go on oxygen at all because it slows them down. It's not considered these days to be in good style to rely on oxygen. It's considered cheating in the sense of, bringing the mountain down to your level rather than your going up to its. So existentialism is an effort to create something out of nothing, to imbue the mountains with human sensibility. We make the mountains a character in our own little play. And we engage in what I call an active form of meditation when we climb on the mountains, especially those long snow slogs, foot after foot after foot after foot. You become self-hypnotized by the repetitive motion activity that's required to surmount these tremendous summits, when you look at them from the base of the peak, you say, there's no way I'm going up that. It's impossible. But if you take it, as they say, one step at a time, I know that's a cliche, but it's actually proved true in climbing. If you do take it one step at a time, you enter into that hazy sense of being transported, ecstasis, and being pulled out of oneself, and merging with the mountain. So that's one of the key goals in mountaineering, is to create something, to make something where there had been nothing, and to leave your mark behind. Mountain features are often named after events that occurred there, like Death Bivouac, or the Traverse of the Gods, or the Hinterstoicer Traverse, named after a famous climber who pulled the rope in after him and forgot he needed it to get back down again. The mountains are soaked with human experience. You could become an armchair mountaineer just from reading the textbooks and the first-person accounts. Maurice Herzog wrote a great book called Annapurna, the first 8,000-meter peak to be climbed. 8,000 meters is 26,300 feet, approximately. And it's above what's called the death zone. Anything above 26,000 feet, you cannot acclimatize. Your body is in a constant state of deterioration. You must spend as little time as possible above 26,000 feet. Run for the summit and get back down before your muscles waste away, because there isn't enough oxygen in the air for you to metabolize enough protein, enough food to sustain human life. So the mountains are inimical. The high mountains, certainly the Himalayan peaks and the Andean peaks. I've climbed in the Andes, and they drain your will. They sap your energy. You have to, it's an effort just to stir out of your bivouac sack, and to do anything at all as opposed to nothing is an achievement. I tied my shoes, it's a big deal, You feel like you've done something. Things we take as an ordinary course, we do this, we do that. Well, in mountaineering, you have to push yourself. You have to really want it. You have to go for it. And the mountain can be seen both as an attractive creature, a siren, singing a siren song, and also a hostile creature. After, some of the mountains were named by peasants, like the Eiger, the famous Eiger in Switzerland. It's named after German ogres. The peasants thought that demons lived in the high peaks. So mountains people didn't understand altitude sickness, nor the more complex types of mountain sickness, the pulmonary and cerebral edema, where there's fluid retention in the lungs and the brain, the maladaptation to altitude. The body knows it needs water, and it retains more water than it needs in places where it shouldn't be. So that can kill you.
Alan, thank you very much for all of the information that you've relayed so far. Listen, I I absolutely love it. People, as I said to you before, the education is second to none. Okay, there's so much information here. Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, MountainReflections.art are the places you have to go to pick up your copies to gather all of the rest. Now, the only question that I have left to ask you, Alan, is, in your opinion, how does mountaineering reveal character?
Well, it's a stressor, okay? And I personally think that even though I've never been in combat, my father was in World War II, not that long ago. And it has the ability to bring out both the best and the worst in human nature. It inspires altruistic acts, selfless acts. You know, in wartime, you hear these stories of people jumping on a grenade to save their buddies. You know, the Medal of Honor stuff is done in this disassociative state of mind. It also can reveal selfishness, meanness of spirit, and ugliness of soul. You know, a me first and me only kind of mentality can emerge in people who are already predisposed to be like that. The mountains don't make you do that. They bring it out. They elicit these traits that are buried sometimes deep inside of people. Some people said, I didn't even know I had it in me to do what I did. You know, he jumped over a cliff to save his friend and did some spectacular rope work that you would think only a Superman would attempt. I didn't think I had it in me. Some people rise to the occasion, as they say. Others sink as low as it's possible for a human being to go into a cauldron of selfishness and disregard of the rights of others. And talking about the rights of others, I would like to say one last thing about existentialism and the freedom of the hills. The rights of others are guaranteed to us in the United States Declaration of Independence. It says that governments are instituted for the purpose of protecting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I maintain that climbing and the freedom of the hills, which is the subtitle of the standard textbook in the field, Mountaineering, the freedom of the hills. Every 6 years it gets updated. They're inextricably linked. There is a political sense of freedom of the hills, a physical sense of freedom of the hills, but the most important is the psychological, internal sense of the freedom of the hills. Freedom from the judgment of others, except one's peers, and a freedom to roam where one will without asking permission. You know, other countries, you have to ask permission to go from, one state to the next. Or, here in America, we take for granted the right to roam at will. That's not the case in other countries. Mountaineering is the ultimate expression of individualism, of Americana, of the notion that one does have the right to go where his skill and talent and experience enables him to go, or her to go. And I can't say enough about the role of the mountaineer in preserving the ever-shrinking uniquely American way of life in preserving this precious freedom that we have, that we were always talking about, but we don't know what we're talking about half the time. Mountaineers are in touch, I believe, with the notions expressed in the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness, more than most people, because they know what the freedom of the hills means, and that it's guaranteed to them by the constitutional right, or the Declaration of Independence proclamation of the human right to the pursuit of happiness. So that's where I'll leave off for now. And I do appreciate your time and giving me this, as your audience probably appreciates by now. This subject matter is chock full of academia, and you wouldn't think it, but it is a highly intellectual sport. It appeals to people with above average intelligence, generally speaking. I don't want to sound snobbish or, but it does appeal to people with strong egos. It tend to be people of unusually high aptitude.
Mm-hmm. And listen, you need to head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, mountainreflections.art, and pick up your copies today. As Alan said, chock filled with information, valuable information, a wonderful resource to add to your shelf, an even better gift to add to someone else's. So once more, we're here on the line with Alan V. Goldman, and we just finished discussing his amazing book, Reflections on Mountaineering, a journey through life as experienced in the mountains. Remember, pick up the 4th edition to get everything that he has in store. You surely will not be disappointed. Alan, this has been an absolute pleasure, such an honor. I truly mean that. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.